New York's busy avenues concealed horrors that defied belief. Parks littered with severed remains, vigils ending in execution, and apartments turned into silent chambers of torture. Inside courtrooms, stories of trust turned into betrayal, left jurors stunned and judges uncompromising. What began as bonds of family or friendship ended in silence, blood, and irreversible loss. And this is Inside New York's Most Dangerous Black Killers, full list and shocking true crime cases. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Cory Martin. He studied crime on television as though it were a manual. But the lessons he took from the screen led to a crime that shocked New York and horrified investigators. Cory Martin, a 31-year-old man from Queens, lived with two 6-year-old Brandy Odom, a woman he trafficked for commercial sex. Prosecutors say he controlled every aspect of her life, calling her nothing more than a moneymaker. Together with his accomplice, Adele Anderson, Martin planned to turn Odom's death into a payday. In 2017, they fraudulently secured 2 life insurance policies in her name, worth $200,000. Less than a year later, Martin strangled Odom in their apartment. What followed was chilling. Court records show Martin purchased cleaning supplies, covered his bathroom in heavy-duty garbage bags, and searched YouTube for tutorials on using a reciprocating saw. He had already been watching the TV series Dexter and episodes of the first 48, not for entertainment, but for guidance on how to kill and conceal evidence. After dismembering Odom in the bathtub, he placed her remains in trash bags. On the 9th of April 2018, parkgoers in Brooklyn's Canarsie Park found body parts scattered like garbage. The brutality drew headlines across the city. Detectives recalled the scene as one of the most gruesome discoveries in recent memory. The investigation quickly focused on Martin. Forensic evidence and digital footprints tied him to the crime. He had obsessively searched for news coverage of the body's discovery and coordinated with Anderson to claim the insurance benefits. But Anderson's attempts failed, and in 2020, both were arrested. At trial in Brooklyn, federal court in March 2024, prosecutors laid out the disturbing detail. They showed jurors Martin's search history, receipts for the saw, and testimony from Anderson. The U.S. Attorney's Office described him as a man who used women as tools and discarded them the same way. A federal jury convicted him of murder for hire, conspiracy, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and fraudulent use of identification. As the verdict was read, Martin sat motionless, his eyes fixed forward, betraying little emotion. Reporters noted the same cold detachment that prosecutors had highlighted throughout the case. His sentencing is set for life in prison. For Brandy Odom's family, the relief was mixed with grief. Her mother, Nicole Odom, told the press, "I waited 6 years. That's one monster that's off the street right now." The case ignited renewed debate on how criminals exploit financial systems, how domestic trafficking remains hidden behind closed doors, and how pop culture influences can turn sinister in the wrong hands. International outlets emphasized the role of digital evidence and the chilling influence of television on Martin's premeditation. From this story come urgent reminders. Never ignore signs of control and financial exploitation in relationships. Be wary of partners who pressure financial instruments or insurance policies. And always trust early instincts. When behavior crosses into obsession, distance may be the only protection. Brandy Odom's murder is a stark reminder that greed can twist human bonds into tools of destruction. Behind every calculated plan lies a victim whose voice is silenced forever. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press HYPE, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Angel M. Thompson. She was the life of every room, yet her disappearance left only silence. What followed was a mystery stretching nearly 2 decades, solved by science and persistence. Angel Marie Thompson stood accused of one of the most disturbing crimes in recent New York and Georgia history. In 2007, Thompson and her girlfriend, 24-year-old Nicole Alston from Manhattan, had moved south to Atlanta. Beneath the surface, prosecutors say their relationship had turned abusive and controlling. Alston confided to her mother days before Thanksgiving that she wanted to return home, but she never made it back. On the 6th of December 2007, investigators in Hogansville, Georgia discovered a burning black bag. Inside were human remains dismembered into 13 pieces. Missing were the head, hands, and feet, critical for immediate identification. That same night, according to court filings, Thompson logged into online dating sites as though nothing had happened. Within weeks, she attempted to rent out the apartment they had shared and to sell their car. The case went cold. For years, Alston's family waited for answers. Meanwhile, Thompson allegedly assumed her girlfriend's identity. Over 8 years, she collected more than $200,000 in government benefits, Social Security checks, food stamps, even Section 8 housing. Investigators later uncovered that in 2010, Thompson had walked into the DMV and renewed Alston's driver's license, replacing the victim's photo with her own. The breakthrough came in 2023. Forensic genealogy, a technology that has transformed cold case investigations, matched the unidentified remains to Nicole Alston. The Fulton County District Attorney called the case one of the most gruesome she had ever handled. Nicole's mother, Sylvia Austin, stood before cameras, fighting tears. "She didn't deserve this," she said. "I never stopped looking for her." Thompson was first arrested in August 2024 for concealing Alston's death and released on bond. A year later, in August 2025, she was charged with malice murder, identity theft, and additional counts related to domestic violence and human trafficking. Prosecutors alleged the motive was both financial and a need for control, i.e., preventing Alston from leaving and ensuring the flow of benefits continued. Court documents detail Thompson's reaction in hearings, silent, stone-faced, showing no visible emotion as charges were read. Reporters noted the contrast between the woman described by prosecutors as a true sociopath and the once familiar partner of a trusting young woman from Manhattan. The public response was immediate. Advocates for domestic violence victims emphasized the dangers of coercive control. Financial crimes investigators highlighted how welfare systems had been manipulated for years without detection. International media covered the case as an example of forensic genealogy's expanding role in justice. From this tragedy, 3 urgent lessons stand out. Always maintain regular check-ins with loved ones who relocate or enter new relationships. Remain cautious about financial dependency and ensure multiple eyes are on shared accounts. And above all, trust early warning signs, because hesitation can cost lives. Nicole Alston's story is a reminder that evil often hides behind familiarity. Justice may be delayed, but truth, when uncovered, leaves no place for silence. Number 3. Esteban Esono-Asue. On a day meant for peace and celebration, violence erupted in one of New York's busiest landmarks. The Christmas morning attack at Grand Central shocked a city already on edge. The man behind it was Esteban Esono-Asue, also known as Stephen Hutcherson, a 36-year-old from the Bronx with a long criminal history. Court records show at least 17 prior arrests, ranging from weapons possession to menacing, with 9 misdemeanor and 2 felony convictions. Police and transit officials already knew him as an emotionally disturbed person. But on the 25th of December 2023, his crimes reached a level that stunned even seasoned officers. Around 11:25 a.m., Esono-Asue entered Tardinary Cafe in the dining concourse of Grand Central Terminal. Witnesses reported he began making racist remarks, telling staff, "I want all the white people dead." He scratched a woman's neck with a fork before turning toward a visiting family from Paraguay. Without warning, he pulled a knife and stabbed a 16-year-old girl in the back, puncturing her lung and diaphragm. Her 4-year-old sister was stabbed in the thigh as their parents tried desperately to shield them. In less than a minute, MTA officers had him in custody. The bloody knife lay on the floor beside him. The 2 sisters were rushed to a hospital in Manhattan, both surviving but with serious injuries. The attack was described as unprovoked and terrifying, especially given that it unfolded inside one of the busiest transportation hubs in the United States. Esono-Asue was arraigned the following day and held without bail. Prosecutors initially charged him with attempted murder as a hate crime, assault, and endangering the welfare of a child. During trial in June 2025, jurors heard how his racist comments escalated into violence within minutes. They also learned that just weeks earlier he had been arrested for threatening another man with a knife, yet received only a conditional discharge. After deliberation, the jury convicted him of assault and related charges. On the 18th of July 2025, in a Manhattan courtroom, he was sentenced to 26 to 29 years in prison. Witnesses described him standing motionless, showing no reaction as the judge announced the punishment. The case drew international attention. The Paraguayan consulate supported the family throughout proceedings, while New York Mayor Eric Adams emphasized how repeat offenders erode the public's sense of safety. Headlines highlighted both the randomness of the attack and the vulnerability of public spaces to sudden violence. From this tragedy, several urgent reminders emerge. Be alert in crowded transit hubs and notice erratic behavior before it escalates. Advocate for accountability when repeat offenders are released without supervision, and ensure that families traveling abroad remain aware of local risks, no matter the season. Christmas Day at Grand Central became a reminder that safety can be shattered in seconds. Justice may confine the attacker, but the scars on his victims remain a permanent mark on New York's conscience. Number 4. Claudia Banton. It began with a familiar face in a familiar crowd, but it ended in an execution that stunned New York and left an entire community demanding answers. Claudia Banton, once considered family by the woman she would ultimately kill, carried out an act of betrayal few could comprehend. Banton and Delia Johnson had grown up together, and Johnson's mother, Delia Berry, said she had welcomed Banton into their home many times, treating her like a daughter. But on the 4th of August 2021, after attending a funeral for a mutual friend, Banton walked into Crown Heights with murder on her mind. That evening, Johnson received a call luring her to Franklin Avenue. At around 9:40 p.m., while she stood at a candlelight vigil, surveillance footage captured a white Mercedes double parking nearby. Banton emerged, walked directly behind Johnson, and fired a bullet into the back of her head. As Johnson fell, Banton pulled the trigger several more times, leaving her lifeless on the sidewalk as mourners scattered in panic. Prosecutors called it a cold-blooded execution, a killing carried out without hesitation in front of witnesses. The initial police response compounded the tragedy. Officers stopped Banton's car blocks away but released her because a witness, under pressure from Banton's own brother, falsely claimed the shooter was a man. Within hours, she vanished, deleting her social media accounts, changing her appearance with wigs, and slipping across state lines. A 4-month manhunt ended in Jacksonville, Florida, when U.S. Marshals tracked her down in November 2021. At trial in Brooklyn Supreme Court, prosecutors admitted they had no clear motive, no recovered murder weapon, and no explanation for why a childhood friend turned assassin. The jury instead relied on powerful surveillance footage, phone records, and witness testimony to convict her of second-degree murder and weapons possession in April 2025. During sentencing in May 2025, Banton stood silent, expressionless, as Justice Margaret Martin delivered a punishment of 23 years to life. In the gallery, the victim's family confronted her with words filled with grief. Johnson's brother, Mathis Lemons, called the act pure evil, while her daughter, Ladea Jenkins, speaking from her U.S. Air Force Base, expressed heartbreak that the killer was once someone she trusted as family. The case drew widespread attention, not only for its brutality but also for the failures that allowed Banton to slip through police hands on the night of the murder. New York officials faced questions about witness reliability, investigative oversight, and the safety of communities when killers can walk free, even briefly. From this crime, painful lessons emerge. Always be cautious when summoned unexpectedly to unfamiliar places. Trust that relationships, no matter how close, do not eliminate risk. And remember that surveillance, community vigilance, and persistence are critical in bringing killers to justice. In the end, Delia Johnson's murder showed that betrayal can cut deeper than any bullet. Justice may confine the killer, but it cannot restore the bond destroyed forever. Number 5. Brigitte Harris. Some crimes are born not from greed or hate, but from years of hidden torment. In Queens, New York, a young woman's desperate act exposed decades of unspoken abuse like that. Brigitte Harris, a 26-year-old security guard at John F. Kennedy International Airport, carried a heavy secret. From the age of 3, she and her sister endured repeated sexual abuse at the hands of their father, 55-year-old Liberian immigrant Eric Goodridge. Court documents later revealed that Harris lived in constant fear he would abuse again, this time targeting her young nieces. When she learned he intended to take the girls to Liberia, she decided she had to stop him. On the 28th of July, 2007, inside her Rockaway apartment, Harris confronted her father. The confrontation escalated into a violent struggle. Armed with pepper spray, handcuffs, and scalpels she had purchased online weeks earlier, she restrained him. In an act prosecutors would later describe as calculated, she gagged him with a towel, causing fatal asphyxiation, and then castrated him with a scalpel. She later admitted she hoped to take away his weapon. Investigators discovered she had attempted to burn the severed organ on her stove before discarding it under a boardwalk. After the killing, Harris checked herself into a psychiatric ward, where she confessed. Police arrested her weeks later. Prosecutors charged her with second-degree murder, but her defense pointed to years of documented sexual abuse and her severe post-traumatic stress disorder. In September 2009, a Queens jury convicted her of the lesser charge of second-degree manslaughter. During sentencing, Harris stood quietly as Justice Arthur Cooperman delivered a maximum term of 5 to 15 years. Despite 7 jurors writing to the court pleading for leniency, the judge said firmly, the crime itself warrants punishment. Her attorneys argued she never intended to kill her father, only to stop him from harming others. The courtroom was divided. Harris's sister Carlene publicly defended her, launching a Save Brigitte campaign and insisting their father had been a predator for decades. Members of Goodridge's extended family denied the abuse and called the killing intentional. The public reaction was powerful. U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer and State Senators Dianne Savino and Eric Adams voiced support for Harris, citing her trauma and the justice gap faced by victims of long-term abuse. Advocates for domestic violence survivors pointed to her case as proof of how systems fail those most vulnerable. Media outlets described her as Lady Vengeance, a nickname she had once used online, but many viewed her not as a villain, but as a tragic symbol of cycles of abuse. Her case leaves stark lessons. Never ignore disclosures of abuse, especially from children, because silence allows predators to thrive. Understand that trauma does not vanish with age, untreated wounds can shape desperate decisions. And remember that justice systems must balance punishment with compassion when victims fight back against abusers. Brigitte Harris's story forces us to ask, when the law punishes survival, where does true justice begin and end? Number 6. Dynus Saxon. He walked runways for major brands and appeared in glossy magazines, but beneath the spotlight was a secret that would soon make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Dynus Saxon, a 20-year-old male model from Manhattan, was known for his appearances in Vogue Italia, Calvin Klein campaigns, and high-profile red carpet events. But on the 10th of November 2024, in the Bronx, police alleged that Saxon brutally stabbed 5-year-old Kadeem Grant to death inside an apartment on Grand Concourse. According to neighbors, shouting and fighting were heard before 2:30 the afternoon. When officers arrived, they found Grant collapsed in the lobby with a stab wound to the chest. Reports noted the knife was still lodged in his body. Blood trailed across the floor, and officers described the scene as gruesome. Additional cuts were visible on his hands and feet, suggesting he fought for his life in his final moments. Emergency responders pronounced him dead at the scene. The next day, Saxon was arrested and taken into custody. Prosecutors say he sustained injuries during the stabbing, appearing in Bronx criminal court with a bandage wrapped tightly around his right hand. He was charged with second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, and criminal possession of a weapon. The court ordered him held without bail. While prosecutors built their case, Saxon's family began defending him in public. His mother told reporters, Dynus didn't just decide to murder somebody, suggesting he may have acted in self-defense and insisting he has no memory of the incident. She described his recollection as hazy and claimed he was hospitalized after the attack. For investigators, the motive remains unclear. Sources told local media that Saxon, Grant, and a third man may have shared a romantic or sexual connection, though authorities have not confirmed if this played a role in the killing. The lack of explanation only deepened the shock surrounding a young man who, until days earlier, was celebrated in the fashion industry. His modeling agency, One Management, quickly cut ties, releasing a statement that he was no longer represented by them. The victim's family mourned a devastating loss. Christopher Grant, the victim's father, described his son as a loving kid who was there for his family and his daughter. He said the hardest part was knowing that his granddaughter would grow up without her father. The case sparked wide attention across social media and news outlets, amplified by Saxon's glamorous career and sudden fall from grace. Headlines underscored the brutality of the stabbing and the jarring image of a fashion model in shackles. From this tragedy, 3 lessons stand clear. Arguments that escalate in private spaces can turn deadly in seconds, walking away before anger controls the room. Trust that appearances of success and fame do not guarantee character. And always remain alert to domestic or relational tensions, because silence can leave families shattered without warning. Dynus Saxon's case is a sobering reminder that violence spares no stage. Fame fades, but the devastation left by a single act of bloodshed endures forever. Number 7. Jamel McGriff. It started with a knock at the door, a request that seemed harmless. Hours later, it ended in fire, torture, and a double homicide that left New York reeling. The man accused is 42-year-old Jamel McGriff, a Bronx resident described by police as a career criminal. His record spans 3 decades, including violent robberies and sex offenses. At the time of the murders, McGriff was on parole after serving 16 years for a 2006 robbery. He had also failed to register as a sex offender in 2024, a violation that went unchecked. By September 2025, authorities say he was wanted in connection with 2 armed robberies when he targeted an unsuspecting couple in Queens. On the morning of September 8, McGriff went door to door in Bellerose, using the ruse of asking to charge his phone. Neighbors turned him away, but 76-year-old Frank Olton agreed to help. Minutes later, surveillance captured Olton shouting, "Get the F out of here," as McGriff forced his way inside. What followed was 5 hours of horror. Investigators believe McGriff searched the home for valuables before attacking. Frank was found in the basement, tied to a pole and stabbed repeatedly in the neck and chest. His wife, 77-year-old Maureen, was discovered on the first floor, her body burned and her larynx fractured. Fires had been set on both levels of the house. Prosecutors later called it a horrific double homicide involving torture. After leaving with bags of stolen property, McGriff used Frank's credit card to buy nearly $800 in luxury clothing at Macy's, even swiping it under his own rewards account. He also purchased movie tickets at Union Square and pawned the couple's cell phones the next day using his own ID. Investigators tracked him swiftly through these reckless transactions. On September 10, NYPD officers arrested him at Lucky Strike in Times Square. Queens prosecutors charged him with 37 counts, including 14 counts of murder, kidnapping resulting in death, arson, robbery, and identity theft. At arraignment, McGriff appeared defiant. Reporters noted he muttered accusations about the victims rather than addressing the charges. He was ordered held without bail and now faces multiple life sentences without parole. The victims, Frank and Maureen Olton, were remembered as pillars of their community. Their son, an FDNY paramedic, was alerted by the family security system and was the first to call 911. Officials said the crime shattered the sense of safety and security in New York. Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch added that McGriff's failure to register as a sex offender should have violated his parole, sparking public anger at systemic failures. From this tragedy, critical lessons emerge. Never allow strangers into your home under the guise of simple favors. Ensure family members, especially seniors, know how to respond to unsolicited requests. And demand accountability in parole enforcement, because overlooked violations can have deadly consequences. The murders of Frank and Maureen Olton stand as a reminder that unchecked violence does not just break laws, it destroys the very trust that holds communities together. Number 8. Kelly Forbes. A marriage meant to bring stability collapsed within weeks, leaving behind a crime scene that prosecutors described as cold-blooded and deliberate. Kelly Forbes, a 29-year-old beautician and medical assistant originally from Trinidad, had endured a difficult life marked by trauma, including kidnapping and assault before immigrating to the United States. She met real estate worker Michael Forbes at a salon, where he showered her with gifts and promises of security. They married in September 2007, but within 2 months the relationship spiraled into violence and betrayal. On the 21st of November 2007, inside their Merrick home, Kelly strangled her 50-year-old husband with an orange electrical cord. Prosecutors later told the jury that strangulation takes time, it takes intent. Her 7-year-old daughter slept in the next room as the fatal attack unfolded. Instead of immediately calling the police, Kelly waited more than an hour. At 8:19 a.m., she sent a text message to her lover, Jeremy Bryant, a man she had met on MySpace weeks earlier, writing, "No, I did it." Only later did she dial 911. When officers arrived, Michael was still alive but unresponsive. He died at the hospital soon after. The Nassau County District Attorney charged Kelly with murder. At trial, her defense argued she was a battered wife acting in self-defense. They claimed Michael had grown physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive, and that he attacked her first with the same cord she later used against him. Prosecutors countered that she was motivated not by fear, but by infidelity, pointing to her online affair and the damning text confession. The jury rejected the murder charge, but found her guilty of manslaughter in June 2008. On August 18, Judge Gerald Carter sentenced her to 21 years in prison, noting the brutality of the method. "This is not like a shooting or a knife," he said. "Strangulation requires intent." In court, Kelly stood quietly, her face unreadable as the sentence was handed down. The victim's family gave emotional testimony. Michael's teenage daughter asked Kelly directly, "Why did you do this to my father? He was my best friend." His father dismissed Kelly's abuse claims, insisting his son treated her like a queen and had bought her a Mercedes. Prosecutors emphasized that no physical signs of abuse were ever documented. The case drew media coverage not just for its brutality, but also because social media played a direct role. Kelly's online messages to her lover became central evidence, highlighting how digital footprints can expose private lives inside a courtroom. This case leaves painful lessons. Recognize early red flags of abuse and seek help before violence escalates. Understand that secrecy and infidelity can complicate both relationships and legal defenses. And always remember, delays in seeking help after violence can irreversibly shape how justice is served. The killing of Michael Forbes is a reminder that behind closed doors, love can transform into lethal betrayal. Justice may be rendered, but the scars of silence and secrecy remain. Number 9. Sheldon Johnson Jr. When redemption turns to horror, New York witnesses a shocking betrayal that questions everything we believe about second chances. Sheldon Johnson Jr., 48 years old, had built a reputation as a voice for reform. A former high-ranking Bloods member, he had served 25 years for attempted murder and robbery before his release in May 2023. He became a counselor for at-risk youth at Queens Defenders, and only weeks before the crime, appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, telling millions how he turned his life around. He called himself a product of intergenerational incarceration, pointing to his family's long history of prison sentences. On the 5th of March 2024, police say that same man murdered his longtime childhood friend, 4-year-old Colin Small, inside Small's Bronx apartment. Just after 1 a.m., neighbors heard 2 gunshots, followed by a chilling plea, "Please don't, I have a family," then 2 more shots. By that night, officers responding to a wellness check discovered Johnson inside the apartment, and what they found horrified even veteran detectives. Small's torso and 1 foot were crammed into a blue plastic bin. The next day, a warrant led officers to Johnson's Harlem apartment. Inside, his freezer were the victim's head, legs, and arms. Surveillance video revealed Johnson entering and leaving the building repeatedly that morning, wearing disguises including a blonde wig and even the victim's clothing. He carried cleaning supplies, and the same blue bin later found with body parts inside. Investigators also located a Tyvek suit in his car, raising suspicions of a calculated effort to conceal the crime. Johnson was arrested on March 5 and formally charged 2 days later with murder, manslaughter, weapons possession, and concealment of a human corpse. As he was escorted from the precinct, he shouted to reporters, "I'm innocent." He later pleaded not guilty in court and was ordered held without bail. The brutality of the crime drew immediate media attention, amplified by his recent high-profile appearance with Joe Rogan and photos of him with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Prosecutors called the murder exceptionally brutal. Meanwhile, the victim's family said that Small had been supporting Johnson financially since his release from prison. Their grief was compounded by betrayal, knowing the man accused of killing him was someone he once trusted as a brother. In the courtroom, Johnson stood with a calm, almost hardened expression as charges were read. Supporters from his reform work watched silently, one wearing a jacket referencing wrongful conviction arrests. The Queens Defenders organization, where he worked as a counselor, declined public comment. From this case, sobering lessons emerge. Never ignore early signs of volatility, even in people who project change. Understand that long histories of trauma can manifest in dangerous ways if untreated. And remember, trust should never replace caution when past violence is part of someone's record. The story of Sheldon Johnson forces us to confront a painful paradox: how a man once hailed as a model of redemption could be accused of such calculated brutality. Number 10. Shane Devon Tamura. A cross-country journey ended in bloodshed, raising the question, what drove a young man to unleash chaos in Manhattan? Shane Devon Tamura was a 27-year-old casino surveillance worker from Las Vegas. Born in Hawaii and raised in California, he once played varsity football and was remembered by former teammates as lighthearted and reliable. His father was a retired Los Angeles police officer, but beneath the surface, Tamura was struggling with mental illness, past psychiatric holds, and a growing fixation on the long-term dangers of football. In 2022, he obtained a concealed carry permit, and in 2025, he began stockpiling ammunition. On the 26th of July 2025, Tamura left his gated community in Las Vegas, driving cross-country in his black BMW. Surveillance and traffic cameras captured his progress across Colorado, Nebraska, and New Jersey. By July 28, he was in Manhattan, heavily armed and wearing body armor. At 6:28 p.m., he double-parked near 345 Park Avenue, home to the National Football League headquarters. Carrying a PA-15 semi-automatic rifle, he entered the lobby and opened fire without warning. The first victims were 3 6-year-old Didarul Islam, an off-duty NYPD officer working security, and 4 9-year-old executive Wesley Lepatner. Security guard Aland Etienne was fatally shot moments later, while an NFL employee was struck in the back and critically injured. Witnesses described chaos as Tamura sprayed the lobby with bullets, sending terrified workers fleeing for their lives. He then took an elevator, apparently intending to reach the NFL's offices. Instead, he exited on the 33rd floor, where he fatally shot 2 7-year-old employee Julia Hyman. Minutes later, he walked down a hallway, barricaded himself, and ended his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police recovered a Colt Python revolver, spare magazines, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition from his vehicle. In his pocket, investigators found a note reading, "Football gave me CTE. Steady my brain, please. You can't go against the NFL, they'll squash you." Another letter left at his apartment apologized to his parents, saying he saw only disappointment in their eyes. The brutality of the attack and its symbolic target shocked the nation. Governor Kathy Hochul demanded an assault weapons ban, while President Donald Trump called it a senseless act of violence. Hundreds gathered in Bryant Park for a vigil honoring the victims. Fundraisers for Officer Islam's young family raised more than $200,000, and he was posthumously promoted. This tragedy underscored urgent lessons: never dismiss early warning signs of mental instability, as untreated issues can escalate into public violence. Recognize that firearms purchased in states with weak laws can easily be brought into cities with strict controls, and understand how unresolved grievances, left unchecked, can spiral into calculated acts of mass murder. When the smoke cleared, 4 innocent lives were lost, and the city was left to reckon with a painful truth. Violence can erupt anywhere, even from those who once seemed harmless. Some stories end with justice. This one ended with silence and questions that New York may never fully answer. New York has seen crimes that blur the line between betrayal, greed, and unimaginable brutality. Each case leaves scars, not only on families but on the city itself. But this series is far from over. There are more stories buried in court files, more names etched into headlines, and more truths that demand to be told. If you want to be the first to uncover the next chilling case, make sure you subscribe to Justice Reversed and hit the notification bell. That way, you won't just watch the news, you'll stay ahead of it. Because behind every door, every headline, and every silence, another story waits to be revealed.